Hello and welcome. You're watching Good Morning India. I'm Gargi Rawat. We have lots lined up for you ahead. The Sena versus Sena fight in the Supreme Court today.
That's right. I'm Divya Wadhwa. Also today, Sri Lanka will have a new president finally, Gargi, and also lots more coming up. First, let's take a look at the headlines.
The Supreme Court will hear a batch of petitions, including both from the Udhhav Thackeray faction as well as the Eknath Shinde faction over disqualification proceedings against MLAs and issue of appointment of the chief whip.
New satellite images accessed by NDTV indicate more Chinese construction in Bhutan, which means that Chinese forces could end up getting access to a strategic ridge on the Doklam plateau close to India.
5 women, including 3 who forced girls appearing for the NEET medical entrance exam to remove their bras, have been arrested, sources in the Kerala police have said.
Sri Lanka Parliament will meet today and elect a new president. It's a 3-way contest with Ranil Wickremesinghe as well as Dulas Ala Peruma and also Anurag Kumara Dissanayake in the fray.
And a heat wave across Europe as the UK records temperatures of over 40 degrees for the first time. It's also led to a spate of fires. All right, so let's get started. Our top story now, and today it's Sena versus Sena in the Supreme Court. A bench headed by Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana will today hear a clutch of petitions on this dispute between the Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and Shiv Sena Chief Udhhav Thackeray seeking disqualification of rebel Shiv Sena MLAs.
That's right, Gargi. The Thackeray camp claims that Eknath Shinde-led government is illegal until the top court decides on disqualifications, and the rebels claim that they are the real Sena with an overwhelming majority of party MLAs.
Well, let's go across to Sukirti for more on this story. And Sukirti, so a key day today, though, so much has happened since this plea first was admitted by the Supreme Court. Since then, governments have changed. There's a new chief minister. But today, the Supreme Court will take up the matter of disqualification of MLAs.
Well, yes, there are a bunch of pleas that the Supreme Court has before it today. These are going to be pleas both by the Udhhav Thackeray faction as well as the Eknath Shinde faction. The Shinde faction MLAs had moved the Supreme Court with pleas challenging the disqualification proceedings that had been initiated against their MLAs by the Deputy Speaker at that point of time. Later, the Udhhav Thackeray faction moved the Supreme Court against the disqualification proceedings initiated against their MLAs by the Speaker, who's been appointed recently. And also there is other pertaining to the appointment of the chief of the party, both a different chief whip of the party whose instructions all the MLAs are supposed to follow. So there is this big batch of petitions before the Supreme Court, but as you rightly pointed out, all things in the Maharashtra government have changed in the last several days, with the government proving its majority on the floor of the House with a new chief minister and a new deputy chief minister. So last Court had heard all of these matters at length. At that point of time, the Supreme Court had refused to put a stay on the floor test that was going to happen, and at that point Justice Suryakant had said that if something goes wrong, we can always reverse it later. Nothing is irreversible, and that is going to be the real test today. That is that really going to hold true? Will the Supreme Court want to reverse things now that so much has happened in the Maharashtra government, or things are going to wait they are, just the way the Maharashtra government has been functioning, is that going to stay the same, or will the Supreme Court be willing to overturn all of it? So something that everybody in Maharashtra is going to very keenly watch today. But yes, the Maharashtra political crisis has been the big issue for the last several weeks, and all eyes on the Supreme Court now on whether they will be making changes to the Maharashtra government at this point of time.
All right, Sukirti, so we'll keep an eye on all those developments. Now, the Supreme Court hearing comes a day after Udhhav Thackeray has lost support of a majority of the Shiv Sena MPs. This as Eknath Shinde was in Delhi.
Absolutely, Gargi. The Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla recognized now that Rahul Shivale as the floor leader of the party in the lower house, and this comes after 12 of the 19 Shiv Sena MPs in the Lok Sabha, including Maharashtra's Chief Minister Eknath Shinde's son, that Shrikant Shinde requested the Speaker for that particular change.
Meanwhile, Bhavna Gawali has been retained as the chief whip. So the Thackeray, they're losing control of a majority of his Shiv Sena members of parliament.
जो इंटरनल ग्रुप लीडर की प्रोसेस, क्योंकि किस ग्रुप हमारे सब बहुत सारे सांसद हैं, वो ग्रुप लीडर विनायक राव जी से नाराज़ थे, उनके कार्य से नाराज़ थे। 2-2.5 साल में उन्होंने सांसदों का जो काम करना चाहिए था, सांसदों को जो डेवलपमेंट के इश्यूज़ हो स्टेट लेवल से हो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट से, पार्लियामेंट में जो सांसदों को परफॉर्म करना चाहिए उसके लिए जो सपोर्ट करना चाहिए था, वो न करने की वजह से पूरे सांसद नाराज़ थे। तो उनको चेंज करने की सिर्फ प्रोसेस की है हम लोग ने, और वो लेटर हमने स्पीकर महोदय के पास दिया हुआ है। निश्चित रूप से स्पीकर आने वाले दिनों में आज ही उसके बारे में कार्रवाई करेगी। व्हीप हमारी पहले ही थी, वही है, और व्हीप ने ये प्रोसेस की है। नया व्हीप अभी तक कोई चुनाया गया नहीं, जो हमारी चीफ व्हीप भावना गवली ताई है, वही अभी भी है, और उनके माध्यम से ये सब प्रोसेस हुआ है।
Well, let's go across to Saurabh now for more. So, Saurabh, a very key day for Maharashtra politics and for the Shiv Sena. Firstly, as we were discussing with Sukirti, this case comes up in the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, a big setback for Udhhav Thackeray with, most of the MPs now going with the Shinde camp.
Yes, this is a setback, but again, this rebellion was also expected. It was a matter of when, and it was expected around the time of the monsoon session, because that is when the parliamentarians or the MPs are most active. Otherwise, they are usually in their constituencies, etc. So obviously, the rebellion was expected after the massive rebellion of MLAs. And what you see now is basically the Eknath Shinde camp trying to gain control of major sections of the party. In fact, they're also targeting the youth wing, the Shiv Sena, which is, of course, led by Aditya Thackeray. And also what you see is, the Thackeray camp, led by Udhhav Thackeray and Aditya Thackeray, the Shiv Sena, now trying to keep it flocked together. And by keeping it flocked together, they will be traveling to several districts. In fact, even Udhhav Thackeray has said once, the enrollment process is over, the Shiv Sena was in the middle of an enrollment drive. Once that is over, I will tour, every taluka of Maharashtra. Aditya Thackeray has already announced a tour in several districts, including, the recently renamed Aurangabad Sambhajinagar district. Also, he's going to Nashik, he's going to Bhiwandi in Thane, and he's going to Shinde in Ahmednagar district. So, 4 districts where the Shiv Sena is, very, very active. He's going to there to address workers and, basically keep the flock together. So, what you will now see in the days to come is, after the rebellion of MLAs and MPs, you will see a battle for the control of the Shiv Sena. Eknath Shinde says he is the real Shiv Sena. The Thackeray say there can be no, Shiv Sena outside, the party structure that is controlled by them. In fact, Sanjay Raut, who's been summoned by the Enforcement Directorate today again, the Shiv Sena has been blaming the Enforcement Directorate. In fact, Sanjay Raut going as far as to say that, look, even I have been enticed and I have been under pressure, but I haven't given in and, walked away from the party. But and going on to say that, the rebels are now completely in the hands of the BJP. That is the Shiv Sena's position. But at this point, what you will see is a struggle for the control of the party. That battle is also likely to end up in in the court, in the Election Commission. And today, of course, the all-important, hearing in the Supreme Court, which will, in a way, set things in motion and give a clearer picture. But we don't know if the order is expected today itself. The hearing may go on for more than a day. So we really don't know how long each of these lawyers will take to argue their cases.
Right.
And that, of course, we'll know by the end of the day.
Right. Thank you so much, Saurabh, for getting us those details. We will keep tracking that story. And there's more bad news as far as the Thackeray camp is concerned. The
right,
Enforcement Directorate, yes, Gargi has summoned Shiv Sena's Sanjay Raut for questioning today in connection with an alleged money laundering case.
Right, the ED asked Raut, who's being grilled in a case related to the redevelopment of Patra Chawl in Mumbai, to report to its office in the city at 11 this morning, and he'd been last questioned on the 1st of July for about 10 hours. So more bad news, as Saurabh was saying, with Sanjay Raut also being summoned there by the Enforcement Directorate.
Switching tracks now, the NEET shocker as far as Kerala is concerned. Gargi, the women, including 3 who are students appearing for that exam to remove their bra in Kerala's Kollam, have now been arrested according to the police.
Absolutely. This is such a shocking story, and 3 complaints were filed by students who were subjected to this humiliating checks before the entrance exam. So just imagine, they're already stressed about the exam and then being asked to, remove their bra by these women. The National Testing Agency, which at first denied allegations, now sent a fact-finding committee to Kollam in Kerala. That's where the exam center was. Now, in the original complaint, the father of one of the girls who appeared for the exam alleged that she was asked to remove her bra after metal detectors beeped due to the hooks during a security check at the Maharashtra Institute of Information Technology, that is the exam center.
വളരെ മോശമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു അനുഭവം ഉണ്ടായത്. ഹുക്കുള്ള അടിവസ്ത്രമാണോ ഇട്ടേക്കുന്നതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് പറഞ്ഞു എന്നാൽ അങ്ങോട്ട് കയറി നിൽക്കാൻ പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് എന്ത് സംഭവം എന്ന് മനസ്സിലായില്ല. ഞങ്ങൾ വിചാരിച്ചു അവിടെ വെക്കാൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും സ്ഥലം കാണും എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചു. പക്ഷെ അവിടെ ഒരു ടേബിൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ അതിനകത്ത് എല്ലാവരുടെയും കൂടെ കൂട്ടി കുഴച്ചിട്ടേക്കുക. അപ്പം പിന്നെ എക്സാം എഴുതാൻ പോയപ്പോഴും ഞങ്ങൾ മുടിയൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് ഫ്രണ്ട് ഷോൾ ഇല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് മുടിയൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് ഫ്രണ്ടിൽ മറച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു എക്സാം എഴുതിയത്.
Protests outside the Marthoma College in Kerala's Kollam district after 2 more parents complained that their daughters were forced to remove their innerwear before appearing for the national eligibility cum entrance test on Sunday.
ഇന്നർവെയറിൽ എന്തോ ഹുക്ക് മെറ്റൽ ഡിറ്റക്ടർ എന്തോ അടിച്ച് സൗണ്ട് കേൾക്കുന്നു, അതുകൊണ്ട് ആ സാധനം ഊരി മാറ്റണം എന്നവരോട് ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ട പ്രകാരം അവൾക്ക് അത് സാധിക്കില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ കുട്ടിയുടെ ഒരുപാട് മെൻ്റലി ഹലാഷ് ചെയ്തു. അതിനുശേഷം
A father had complained to the police on Sunday that his daughter and several other girls were asked to remove their innerwear as a metal hook on it beeped during security checks. The father said the girls wrote the exam without their bra and were mentally tortured. He quoted the center supervisors as asking, if your future or innerwear is big for you, just remove it and don't waste our time. While protesters demanded the arrest of officials involved, the center superintendent, city coordinator and NEET observer have told the National Testing Agency that conducts the exam that the police complaint by the parent is fictitious and in bad intention. Kollam police seem pretty convinced that there is nothing fictitious about the police complaint. After an initial probe, they have lodged an FIR naming sections 354 and 509, which is outraging and insulting the modesty of a woman. Subsequently, 2 more police complaints have come via email. Kerala's Minister for Higher Education, in a strongly worded letter to the NTA and Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, said the inhuman behavior naked assault on the dignity and honor of the girl students.
Probe should be made in a very detailed manner in this regard, because we have to ensure the students' psychological conditions. They have to write the examination in a peaceful mind, and this had negative impacts according to the student.
I have met the Honorable Minister of Education, Sri Dharmendra Pradhan ji, along with Sri Muratharan was also present. We had a very fruitful discussion about this matter, and I have made all the issues before him, and the government of India, on behalf of the government or the ministry, is saying that a criminal investigation is going on.
With camera person SP Babu in Kerala, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
Now, the horrifying incident that took place yesterday in Haryana that captures the terror of the mining mafia in the state. A senior police officer run over by a stone-laden truck in New district when he went to stop illegal stone mining there.
Gargi, one of the accused, the driver of the vehicle that ran him over, was arrested after he was injured in an exchange of fire with the police. Very shocking incident there, Gargi, coming out, and our colleague Ghazali gets us the details.
Haryana DSP Surinder Singh posted in New district crushed to death by the mining mafia.
We have registered a case of 302, 307, 333, 186 IPC and 353 IPC along with 379, 188. Our teams are in the field very hopeful of for success very quickly.
Surinder Singh got off his police vehicle when he saw a speeding dumper coming from a Ravali side. He signalled the driver to stop, but the truck ran him over.
सुबह से घरेलू बातें होती रहती थी आज भी सुबह बात हुई थी रिटायरमेंट इसी साथ एक बेटा एक बेटी
Opposition leaders have criticized the government over law and order in the state. Just a couple of days ago, over half a dozen Haryana MLAs received threats.
माइनिंग माफिया बेकाबू होता जा रहा है। वैसे तो हरियाणा में सारा कानून व्यवस्था बिल्कुल चरमरा गई है। रोज इतने कत्ल, भाई विधायकों को धमकी, तो आज ना तो विधायक सुरक्षित हैं, ना पुलिस अपने आप को सुरक्षित महसूस करती है।
CM Manohar Lal Khattar has announced 1 crore rupees for the officer's family and promised strict action.
हम वीर सैनिकों को हमेशा ऐसे मामलों में सबका मनोबल बढ़ाने के लिए भी अपने आप को भी प्रस्तुत करना चाहिए और उस परिवार की भी जिसकी क्षति हुई है उसके साथ भी खड़े हैं।
The NGT on several occasions has asked the government of Haryana to take action against illegal mining in the state. But the broad daylight murder of DSP Surinder Singh highlights how the illegal mining continues with impunity. With Mukesh Singh Sengar, Rika Roy for NDTV.
Moving on, Sri Lanka's parliament is now going to decide on the new president. Finally, Gargi, after days of protests and whatnot, right. Now finally they'll find someone to replace Gotabaya Rajapaksa, acting president Ranil Wickremesinghe, the former Rajapaksa line, and now the independent Dulas Allah Peruma, as well as the leftist Anura Kumara Dissanayake are in the fray.
They were nominated by the parties through a secret ballot on Tuesday, and analysts say that the front runner is Ranil Wickremesinghe, a 6-time former Prime Minister who became the acting president after his predecessor resigned, but is despised by protesters who see him as a Rajapaksa ally. In fact, the protest might again pick up if he does become president. The 73-year-old Wickremesinghe has the backing of Rajapaksa's SLPP, the largest bloc in the 225-member parliament. As acting president, Wickremesinghe extended a state of emergency that gives police and security forces sweeping powers, and last week he ordered troops to evict protesters from the state buildings that had been occupied.
We have in fact, Sajid Premadasa, who has stepped out of the presidential race. In fact, he was one of the popular ones, Gargi, and now that he did a step down yesterday out of that race, he stepped out. He has put out a tweet saying, irrespective of who becomes the president of Sri Lanka, it's my humble and earnest request to the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and to all the political parties of India, to the people of India, to keep helping Mother Lanka and its people to come out of this disaster, is what Premadasa has put out in a tweet. What's going to be interesting is what's going to be his role, Gargi, going forward. Is he in the running now for the Prime Minister once the President's decided? To get more, we have Shrija with us.
All right, Shrija, so tell us what's going to happen today? When will all this, take place? And also, if Wickremesinghe does emerge president again, the protesters are going to take to the street?
Well, yes, that's something that's going to happen, because we understand from the protesters as well as various political analysts and activists, what they say is they've been trying to keep Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe out of power for a very, very long time, because they have managed to send, if you remember, it all started with Mahinda Rajapaksa, and after which we saw one after the other family members go, and then we eventually saw Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa also flee the country to Singapore. So all this while they have also been targeting, and the aim has been, as far as protesters, Sri Lankan citizens, they say that they do not want Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe to continue, or even for that matter to be in power, because what we did witness, last week, the minute when the protesters or Sri Lankan citizens received the news that he's going to be made the acting president, we did see what really happened and what transpired on ground. We saw how, the protesters managed to storm his office as well. And there were several rounds of, in terms of tear gas being shelled for over 2.5 hours or so. So we understand that the protesters, or the protests at this point in time, will not quell whatsoever. the protesters say that they will continue with this protest and they will continue to occupy the old parliament as well. So it becomes very crucial. Today is a very, very big day for the Sri Lankans, because what they say is, there are several parliamentarians itself, not just the protesters who really want Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe out of power, but you have several of the opposition leaders have, they've unanimously supported even Mr. Dallas Alahaperuma. Offered to support him as well. This is only to keep, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe not to really have an edge over the other contenders. But as far as political analysts say, yes.
If you can just get us a background on the other contenders as well. We do know 73-year-old Wickremesinghe has been the Prime Minister 6 times around. This time around, he is vying for the role of the President. What about the 63-year-old former journalist and the youngest in the running, the 53-year-old?
Yes, Mr. Dallas Alahaperuma, he is an independent right now. He was with the parent party, which is the SLPP, and after which he decided to become an independent, and he's known to be a rebel leader as well. He's a former journalist. But now with Mr., after Dallas Alahaperuma striking a deal with the SJB, the principal opposition leader, Sajid Premadasa, we understand Sajid has offered, his party has offered to give at least about a bag of 50 votes, okay, as far as the party is concerned. And if you're talking about Dallas himself, he's managing to garner at least about 10 votes. Now that gives him also a very close and a tough fight with Ranil Wickremesinghe. And the leftists, we have the leftist Anura Kumara Dissanayake, who's also, in fact, putting forth a very tough fight. But however, as far as the third candidate, Anura Dissanayake, is concerned, who's the leader of the National People's Party, now he commands just about 3 seats in the parliament. And of course, there are several of the analysts talking about that not really much of a realistic chance as far as Anura Kumara Dissanayake has. But it's going to be a very tough fight between Ranil Wickremesinghe, if you're talking about the numbers game in the 225 parliamentary seat, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, and between Dallas Alahaperuma. Because if you're looking at the kind of numbers here, there are chances, the original, that is in the 2020 August, the original composition of SLPP, the majoritarian party, had at least about 145. This is much before the at least 54 lawmakers, they broke away and they became independent. Now it has about 97 lawmakers. As far as the SJB is concerned, it has about 50 right now at the moment. Alahaperuma, his own lawmakers, make it to 10. So it's a very tough fight, a very close neck-to-neck fight that we're looking at between Alahaperuma and Ranil. But again, what really happens once the voting takes place with regard to cross-voting, that is something we have to wait and watch out for.
Absolutely. The new leader will be in office for the remaining portion of the Rajapaksa regime that will be up until November of 2024, Gargi.
That's right. We'll keep an eye on that and track all those developments. With that, time for us to slip into a short break. But now another big story we're tracking. New satellite images which were accessed by NDTV indicate that a Chinese village constructed 9 kilometers east of the Doklam plateau, where Indian and Chinese forces faced off in 2017.
Right, Gargi, that particular village is now fully inhabited with cars parked at the doorstep of virtually every single house. In China's aggressive build-up, is this a warning to India? Our colleague Vishnu Som gets us this report.
This is the area where India and China had a tense 73-day standoff in 2017. You can see in red the Doklam plateau flanked by Sikkim to the west, China to the north and Bhutan to the east. Now in 2017, China started extending this road which they began constructing across the plateau. In fact, they'd started constructing a few years prior to that. Their goal was to get to this ridge. It's a ridge called the Jamperi Ridge. Access here meant the Chinese would get a sighter of the Siliguri corridor, the chicken's neck, the narrow sliver of land that connects the northeast of India with the rest of the country. They were prevented from getting to this ridge here by the Indian Army. This was the face-off site which you see marked in red. But the Chinese weren't done with Doklam. Over the last few years, they made deep incursions in the river valley adjacent to the Doklam plateau. That's marked to the right of your screen, deep inside Bhutanese territory. And what we'll show you, and we'll indicate this first on this map, a new village almost completed. There's a Chinese village called Pangda, which we identified first in a report in 2020. And there's also the site of a third village and also a deep excavation. And we'll bring you all of these details in these images. So what do the new satellite images now show? In fact, these are images which have extreme clarity, as we can demonstrate here. The first village is almost complete. It lies just across what was thought to be the international border between Bhutan and China. Let's zoom in over here. As you can see, this village between Bhutan and inside Bhutan, just inside the international border, now appears to be almost complete. It's not the village which we identified in 2020, which is this village, the Chinese village of Pangda. That lies just south of the first village. Again, this very high resolution imagery indicates that this village is almost complete, and there are even cars at every doorstep, an indicator that it is occupied, and that is a big worry. We'll move to a village which is now being constructed south of Pangda. As you can see over there, clearly there are foundations of construction sites which have been laid over here, and as we go across this site, we'll end up at two bridges which have been constructed across the Amochu River. That's the river here, fast flowing, ends up eventually in India. That means the Chinese are trying to construct on the other bank of the Amochu as well. Remember, this is not their territory at all. It is Bhutanese territory. They are several kilometers, in fact almost 10 kilometers into Bhutanese territory. All of these villages constructed by a road. Further south, there is this deep excavation. Again, on the side of this road, let's again zoom in over here and let's scroll through this area, and you can see dumpers over there, you can see bulldozers over here on this construction site. We are almost now 10 kilometers inside Bhutan. So what is the bottom line over here? Why are we showing you these images as well? Well, by constructing south inside Bhutanese territory and in the direction of India, China is now nearly adjacent to that same ridgeline that they wanted to get to in 2017. Is this where we are now headed? In fact, this ridgeline, about 8 to 9 kilometers away now, considering the pace of their construction and their ability to construct in mountainsides, the Chinese may just make an effort at getting to Jampheri. Will India stop them? Now, we've spoken to the army, and they've army sources telling us, and I quote, the Indian Army maintains a continuous and seamless vigil on all activities along its borders. Necessary mechanisms and safeguards to meet any contingencies are in place.
All right, now moving on to other news. And suspended BJP spokesperson Nupur Sharma cannot be arrested in the 9 cases that have been filed against her over her comments on Prophet Muhammad. That's what the Supreme Court said yesterday.
The court asked various states to respond to her request to combine multiple FIRs against her into one single FIR. And today, the Supreme Court will hear Alt News co-founder and fact-checker journalist Mohammed Zubair's plea seeking to quash all his 6 FIRs registered against him in Uttar Pradesh. The plea has also challenged the constitution of the Special Investigation Team against him by the Uttar Pradesh Police, Gargi.
So this will be interesting to see. Now, the Supreme Court had on Monday granted him interim protection from arrest while calling the situation a vicious cycle of arrests in which as soon as he gets interim bail in one case, he is arrested in another case. 6 cases filed against him in Uttar Pradesh. The top court had also issued a notice to the UP government and sought its response in this entire matter. Let's go across to Sukirti for more on this. And Sukirti, this is something that you've been reporting on, and we've been reporting quite extensively on how he's got these 6 cases suddenly against him in Uttar Pradesh. And as the Supreme Court said, the minute he receives bail in one, he's arrested in another and remains in police custody. So today it comes up in the Supreme Court.
Well, yes, today it is set to come up in the Supreme Court, and Ms. Vrinda Grover, who's been representing Mr. Zubair in the top court, is likely to seek further extension of the interim protection from arrest because she's been repeatedly pointing out to the court how once he gets interim bail in one case, he's immediately arrested in another case, and she'd been pointing out that all of these FIRs are almost on the same grounds of hurting religious sentiments. But these tweets had actually pointed out people who make hate speeches, and while those people who make communal statements, they are roaming free. It is Mr. Zubair who's being arrested despite just being a journalist who is bringing the facts to the fore by calling out the hate speeches of these people. So at this point of time, Mr. Zubair is going to hope that the top court will give him further relief, because at least in one FIR that pertains to Sitapur, he was earlier given interim protection, which is until September. So that is a longer relief that he's got, and he would be seeking a similar kind of relief today as well in the other cases.
Right. Thank you so much, Sukirti. We'll keep tracking that story and keep coming back to you for more on that. Moving on. Now, the NEET shocker from Kerala, 5 women, including 3 who are students appearing for that exam, to remove their bra in Kerala's Kollam, Gargi.
That's right. Those 5 women have been arrested. It's an absolutely shocking story that, these students who are coming for an entrance exam, which in itself is so stressful, are then asked to remove their bras simply because the metal hooks, were letting off the security, the detectors there, and the National Testing Agency, which at first denied these allegations and now sent a fact-checking committee to Kollam, where this exam was held. And in the original complaint, the father of one of the girls alleged that she was asked to remove her bra, as we said, due to the metal detectors. And this was at the Marthoma Institute of Information Technology, which was the exam center.
Now, a teen in Kerala's Kollam, one of the women who were asked to remove their bra, has now in fact spoken and described the humiliation that she had to go through before sitting for that exam and during that as well, and how her hair was needed to cover her chest.
ഇപ്പം വളരെ മോശമായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു അനുഭവം ഉണ്ടായത്. ഹുക്കുള്ള അടിവസ്ത്രമാണോ ഇട്ടേക്കുന്നതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. അപ്പം ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് പറഞ്ഞു എന്നാൽ അങ്ങോട്ട് കയറി നിൽക്കാൻ പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് എന്ത് സംഭവം എന്ന് മനസ്സിലായില്ല. ഞങ്ങൾ വിചാരിച്ചു അവിടെ വെക്കാൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും സ്ഥലം കാണും എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചു. പക്ഷെ അവിടെ ഒരു ടേബിൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ അതിനകത്ത് എല്ലാവരുടെയും കൂടെ കൂട്ടി കുഴച്ചിട്ടേക്കുക. അപ്പം പിന്നെ എക്സാം എഴുതാൻ പോയപ്പോഴും ഞങ്ങൾ മുടിയൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് ഫ്രണ്ട് ഷോളില്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് മുടിയൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് ഫ്രണ്ട് മറച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു എക്സാം എഴുതിയത്.
Protests outside the Marthoma College in Kerala's Kollam district after 2 more parents complained that their daughters were forced to remove their innerwear before appearing for the national eligibility cum entrance test on Sunday.
ഇന്നർവെയറിൽ എന്തോ ഹുക്ക് മെറ്റൽ ഡിറ്റക്ടർ എന്തോ അടിച്ച് സൗണ്ട് കേൾക്കുന്നു, അതുകൊണ്ട് ആ സാധനം ഊരി മാറ്റണം എന്നവരോട് ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ട പ്രകാരം അവൾക്ക് അത് സാധിക്കില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ കുട്ടിയുടെ ഒരുപാട് മെൻ്റലി ഹലാഷ് ചെയ്തു. അതിനുശേഷം
A father had complained to the police on Sunday that his daughter and several other girls were asked to remove their innerwear as a metal hook on it beeped during security checks. The father said the girls wrote the exam without their bra and were mentally tortured. He quoted the center supervisors as asking, if your future or innerwear is big for you, just remove it and don't waste our time. While protesters demanded the arrest of officials involved, the center superintendent, city coordinator and NEET observer have told the National Testing Agency that conducts the exam that the police complaint by the parent is fictitious and in bad intention. Kollam police seem pretty convinced that there is nothing fictitious about the police complaint. After an initial probe, they have lodged an FIR naming sections 354 and 509, which is outraging and insulting the modesty of a woman. Subsequently, 2 more police complaints have come via email. Kerala's Minister for Higher Education, in a strongly worded letter to the NTA and Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, said the inhuman behavior naked assault on the dignity and honor of the girl students.
Probe should be made in a very detailed manner in this regard, because we have to ensure the students' psychological conditions. They have to write the examination in a peaceful mind, and this had negative impacts according to the student.
I have met the Honorable Minister of Education, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan ji, along with Shri Udhhav was also present. We had a very fruitful discussion about this matter, and I have made all the issues before him, and the government of India, on behalf of the government or the ministry, is saying that a criminal investigation is going on.
With camera person SP Babu in Kerala, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
All right, well, let's now get you the latest from Europe, and we've been talking about the heat wave there and the wildfires and, all these stories emerging of how people are trying to keep cool there. Now, people in Germany attempted to keep cool as the heat wave was raging and brought the temperatures over just 30 degrees. Of course, Divya, for us, it doesn't sound like too much, but in the west of the country, temperatures even scratched the 40-degree mark.
Absolutely, Gargi. The heat is forecast to move on to the rest of the country, and according to the German weather service, the temperature is expected to drop again throughout Germany from tomorrow. But that heat wave is now moving to the northern part of the country, which basically means towards Germany, Belgium and Italy.
That's right. And, showing people you're at fountains is one thing and trying to keep cool. But the real fears is about, the elderly and, it affecting their health and being hospitalized, because that is what we've seen in Europe when the heat wave happens. Now, if we talk about UK, people have been forced to flee from their homes on the hottest day on record there in UK as flames and smoke from a huge grass fire engulfed their houses.
Absolutely, Gargi. 40.2 degrees Celsius at the London's Heathrow area. The Heathrow airport, a helicopter belonging to a news network was seen capturing the shocking scenes as winds fanned the fire, which had begun in this nearby area. There's a grasslands in the village of Wennington to the east of London. Residents could be seen running from their homes as the fire reached.
It's believed that between 5 to 7 homes were set alight along with the local fire station, while residents had to be evacuated. So heat wave and then obviously these fires being sparked by it. The London Fire Brigade in fact had to scramble for 15 fire engines, while the London Ambulance Service also said it was treating people at the scene. Welcome back. Now, a special interview. Anil Kapoor has recently been part of the hit Jug Jug Jio alongside Varun Dhawan, Neeti Kapoor and Kiara Advani. The actor sat down with NDTV's Rohit Khilnani.
Right, he spoke about his career that spanned over 4 decades and being a part of different genres. He broke down each decade as it was for him. Let's listen in.
Anil Kapoor, thank you for entertaining us for so many years.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for having me over here.
Anil, what makes an actor's career? To start with, it's the choices of movies. What is on your mind when you sit back and think, what are the kind of films I should do?
Actually, let me cut it because it's been 4 decades, more than 4 decades since I'm working. So the first decade was obviously because I couldn't make choices. The filmmakers, wanted, I tried to get work and I got work. That includes directors like Bapu Saab, M.S. Satyu, Mani Ratnam. These are the directors initially I worked with. I did bit roles. There was Lake Tandon, and then the next decade, obviously, you start getting work and then get a kind of recognition. So Wo Saath Din happened, and which was, for me was very, very successful. The film and then of course the second decade, obviously, then you want to, make choices where you can, to a certain extent, say no, I want to do this kind of film. I want to do that kind of film. I want this director, and then. But you want to become the biggest star also, so all these things are running in your mind, so you make those kind of choices as an actor, but more as a star also. Then the third decade, okay, now, is now there is a little bit of, now you want to maintain yourself. Few films have done very well, few films to a certain extent start, not doing well, which we expected. Then you make those kind of choices where you feel, no, that has gone wrong. So let me do this. Let me now do films with certain, directors who I've never worked with. So those kind of choices. Then the fourth decade happened. Fourth decade happened. Okay, now you feel, no, I think there is, certain kind of reinvention has to happen, which was always there.
Right.
And you have to re-strategize it. You have to rethink what kind of work you have to do. You start feeling in the third decade only, then you make those kind of choices. I think the third decade I made those kind of choices, in a way like Bibi Number 1 Taal around. And then the fourth decade obviously is where I did films like Slumdog and Dil Dhadkne Do and Mubaraka and Welcome. Those kind of films I did, and which you were not exactly the leading man, but you have a
solid
character. So that's been, in a way, the kind of choices I made. So, now, obviously, this last year has been last 2 years has been pretty exciting for me because I did AK vs. AK, which was a great experience working with Vikram Motwane and Anurag Kashyap. Then I've done Thar, which was produced by our company, and which I got an opportunity to work again with Harsh, which has been not only loved over here by the critiques but all over the world, and internationally even more. And then Jug Jug Jio happened again. The film's done very well in India, but extremely well internationally.
Right.
So so it's been pretty good, a year and a half, 2 years,
Right.
with the kind of choices I've made. Yeah.
All right, so 40 years of Anil Kapoor, how amazing.
And still going strong and looking fit and fabulous as ever.
That's right. And finally, a special report. Young Garvita Gulati is on a mission to save water and create awareness among people in India. She started supporting environmental causes at the age of just 13 when she first learned that water wastage by customers who casually leave half-drunk glasses of water in restaurants.
Right, Gargi, amounts to about 14 million litres of water wastage every year globally. And she has now founded the Why Waste Foundation, an app that's been recognized as a global change maker and an Ashoka Youth change maker. NETV's Amika Singh spoke to her, and she's also a UN Youth climate leader on her mission. Let's just take a look at her story.
What pushed you to talk about water conservation and eventually start your own organization, Why Waste? And why did you think of water?
So I was on a trip in Ahmedabad in Gujarat with my family, and we were visiting one of the step wells. And as we were sort of navigating the place and enjoying, the scenic beauty of a step well which was completely dry, a little girl ran up to me and instead of she had slightly tattered clothes, her face was worn, and I thought she might ask me for money or some food or something like that. Instead she asked me for the water in the bottle in my hands, and I think that moved me to my core. I started reading more about the water crisis. Because that was for the first time I realized that this is also something that there is a lack of. Water is the universal elixir of life, and yet today there are so many people who face the lack of it.
As UN's young climate leader, you're championing SDG 6, clean water and sanitation for all. What steps do you think are needed right now to tackle India's water crisis, and especially in the situation that we are right now?
When we think of water being wasted, we're always thinking of, or if we're thinking of scarcity of water, right? We're always thinking of people maybe in a rural community, someone walking miles to get a glass of water, but no one talks about why they're in that situation. They're in that situation because we in urban communities have overconsumed water. Till the time we don't change the narrative and get the right narrative of not what the problem is, but why it's being caused, we're not going to be able to even take that first step to change.
Also, tell us about the mobile application Why Waste app, and how does it help an individual in their daily life?
It allows you to calculate your water footprint. It takes you through a very quick, less than 2 minutes quiz that tells you what your on an average daily water footprint could look like, and then teaches you simple, small, easy methods that are not difficult, just different, that those small habit changes that you can build in your life to then scale and save hundreds and hundreds of liters of water.
Let's get started with the big story in the Supreme Court today. The top court will be hearing a batch of petitions and pleas. This is pertaining to the recent political crisis in Maharashtra that led to the fall of the Mahavikas Aghadi government in the state. The matter will be heard by the Chief Justice of India-led bench.
And this batch of petitions includes those filed by Udhhav Thackeray faction as well as the Eknath Shinde faction over disqualification proceedings against MLAs and the issue of appointment of the chief whip of the Shiv Sena. So those crucial petitions coming up in the Supreme Court today.
Well, let's go across to Sukirti for more on this. And Sukirti, it's a very, very key hearing because, this is going to set precedent across the country for such matters and disqualifications and rebel MLAs, though also coming, after so many other developments have taken place, a change of guard in Maharashtra.
Well, yes, this comes after the majority has already been proven on the floor of the House. A chief minister as well as a deputy chief minister has already been declared. So the big question is how much of that is ultimately going to be reversed by the Supreme Court, because that is something Justice Suryakant had pointed out the last time he heard all of these pleas at length. He had pointed out by saying that nothing is irreversible. He had refused to put a stay on the floor test that was going to be held by saying that nothing is irreversible. If something happens in an illegal manner, if something is invalid, the judges can always go back and turn those things. But that is the big question, is all of that going to happen, considering there is a big batch of petitions. These have been filed by both the Udhhav Thackeray faction as well as the Eknath Shinde faction over disqualification proceedings against each side's MLAs, and also the chief whip's appointment, whether it is going to be Sunil Prabhu of the Shiv Sena faction or the Udhhav Thackeray faction, or is it going to be Bharat Gogawale, who is from the Eknath Shinde faction. So a lot of questions at this point of time, and also a big lineup of lawyers expected in the top court today, with Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi and Kapil Sibal expected to represent the Udhhav Thackeray faction, while Mr. Harish Salve is expected to represent the Eknath Shinde faction.
All right, Sukirti, thanks so much for joining us with those details. So, Sena versus Sena in the Supreme Court today, and this comes a day after the Udhhav Thackeray faction lost support of a majority of Shiv Sena MPs. So, there was really bad news for him yesterday as well.
That's right, Gargi. The Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla recognized the Shinde faction Shiv Sena leader Rahul Shivale as the floor leader of the party in the lower house. Now, 12 of the 19 Shiv Sena MPs in the Lok Sabha, including Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde's son, Shrikant Shinde, requested the speaker for this change. So, bad news continuing for the Thackeray faction of the Shiv Sena.
जो इंटरनल ग्रुप लीडर की प्रोसेस, क्योंकि किस ग्रुप हमारे सब बहुत सारे सांसद हैं, वो ग्रुप लीडर विनायक राव जी से नाराज़ थे, उनके कार्य से नाराज़ थे। 2-2.5 साल में उन्होंने सांसदों का जो काम करना चाहिए था, सांसदों को जो डेवलपमेंट के इश्यूज़ हो स्टेट लेवल से हो, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट से, पार्लियामेंट में जो सांसदों को परफॉर्म करना चाहिए, उसके लिए जो सपोर्ट करना चाहिए था, वो न करने की वजह से पूरे सांसद नाराज़ थे। तो उनको चेंज करने की सिर्फ प्रोसेस की है हम लोग ने, और वो लेटर हमने स्पीकर महोदय के पास दिया हुआ है। निश्चित रूप से स्पीकर आने वाले दिनों में आज ही उसके बारे में कार्रवाई करेगी। व्हीप हमारी पहले ही थी, वही है, और व्हीप ने ये प्रोसेस की है। नया व्हीप अभी तक कोई चुनाया गया नहीं। जो हमारी चीफ व्हीप भावना गवली ताई है, वही अभी भी है, और उनके माध्यम से ये सब प्रोसेस हुआ है।
All right, let's go across to Saurabh now for more on this story. So, you know, Saurabh, it's really been a setback after setback, and today the key hearing in the Supreme Court as well. But meanwhile, what is the Thackeray faction now planning, having, lost most of their MLAs and now most of their MPs as well? Saurabh?
That's right. In fact, this, of course, is the Thackeray faction's biggest challenge, to keep its flock together. Now, there is, of course, a difference between the party rank and file, which is the party workers, and also, the party, leaders and MLAs who are, of course, here and in the MPs who've already, revolted against the leadership. But beyond that, this is also going to be now a question of several things. For example, there's the cabinet formation, and all of that is hanging in the balance because of what is going to take place in the Supreme Court. And that's something that, is very clear, because a lot of things will depend on the Supreme Court. Because if the Supreme Court decides that the Thackeray faction's whip is something that's valid, then a lot of things change. However, if the Supreme Court decides that no, the rebel faction is valid, then of course things are different. So much of what happens in Maharashtra beyond today and tomorrow after the Supreme Court hearing will depend on which way the Supreme Court decides. Meanwhile, the Thackerays are already trying to try and put their plans in place. Aditya Thackeray has already announced a series of meetings in several districts, including Ahmednagar, Nashik, and the newly renamed Sambhaji Nagar district, which was earlier Aurangabad. So all of these things are, happening at the same time. Cabinet formation was scheduled to happen after the presidential elections, but in all likelihood, what we are being given to understand that if it doesn't happen immediately, then of course the Eknath Shinde camp will wait for the Supreme Court to pass its orders before actually making the cabinet, because that would mean a redrawing up of all the plans if the Supreme Court decides to disqualify the rebel MLAs against whom the Shiv Sena moved initially.
Right, Saurabh. Thanks so much for joining us with those details. And Gargi, the trouble for the Thackeray camp really does not seem to be ending anytime soon. The Enforcement Directorate has summoned Shiv Sena's Sanjay Raut for questioning today in connection with an alleged money laundering case.
In fact, Sanjay Raut has, talked about this summons and the ED case against him and said, see, despite this, I've not switched over to the other camp. So he's tried to use that as an example. The ED has asked Raut to report to its office in Mumbai at 11 this morning in a case related to redevelopment of Patra Chawal in Mumbai. Now, he was last questioned in the case on the 1st of July, and that went on for about 10 hours.
And let's go to the shocking NEET case from Kerala. 5 women, including 3 who are students appearing for the NEET exam to remove their bra in Kerala's Doklam, have been arrested, and this is as per the sources in the Kerala police.
In fact, you can see those protests that broke out in Kerala over this entire case. Now, it's absolutely shocking and a little absurd as well. These complaints filed by students, they were subjected to humiliating checks before they took their entrance exam. So just imagine how stressed they must have been for the exam, and then asked to remove their bras. The National Testing Agency, which had first denied these allegations, has now sent a fact-finding committee to Doklam. In the original complaint, the father of one of the girls said that she was asked to remove her bra after the metal detectors beeped due to the hooks during a security check. Now, it all sounds really very, very absurd. In fact,
that's right, Gargi. We can only imagine the state of these teen girls. In fact, a teen girl from Kerala who is one of the many who were allegedly forced to remove their bra before this medical entrance exam described her humiliation as she sat for the exam using her hair to cover herself. Let's listen in.
അപ്പം വളരെ മോശമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു അനുഭവം ഉണ്ടായത് ഹുക്കുള്ള അടിവസ്ത്രമാണോ ഇട്ടേക്കുന്നതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. അപ്പം ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് പറഞ്ഞു എന്നാൽ അങ്ങോട്ട് കയറി നിൽക്കാൻ പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് എന്ത് സംഭവം എന്ന് മനസ്സിലായില്ല. ഞങ്ങൾ വിചാരിച്ചു അവിടെ വെക്കാൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും സ്ഥലം കാണും എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചു. പക്ഷെ അവിടെ ഒരു ടേബിൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ അതിനകത്ത് എല്ലാവരുടെയും കൂടെ കൂട്ടി കുഴച്ചിട്ടേക്കുക. അപ്പം പിന്നെ എക്സാം എഴുതാൻ പോയപ്പോഴും ഞങ്ങൾ മുടിയൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് ഷോളില്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് മുടിയൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് ഫ്രണ്ടിൽ മറച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു എക്സാം എഴുതിയത്.
Protests outside the Marthoma College in Kerala's Kollam district after 2 more parents complained that their daughters were forced to remove their innerwear before appearing for the national eligibility cum entrance test on Sunday.
ഇന്നർവെയറിൽ എന്തോ ഹുക്ക് മെറ്റൽ ഡിറ്റക്ടർ എന്തോ അടിച്ച് സൗണ്ട് കേൾക്കുന്നു, അതുകൊണ്ട് ആ സാധനം ഊരി മാറ്റണം എന്നവരോട് ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ട പ്രകാരം അവൾക്ക് അത് സാധിക്കില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ കുട്ടിയുടെ ഒരുപാട് മെൻ്റലി ഹലാഷ് ചെയ്തു. അതിനുശേഷം
A father had complained to the police on Sunday that his daughter and several other girls were asked to remove their innerwear as a metal hook on it beeped during security checks. The father said the girls wrote the exam without their bra and were mentally tortured. He quoted the center supervisors as asking, if your future or innerwear is big for you, just remove it and don't waste our time. While protesters demanded the arrest of officials involved, the center superintendent, city coordinator and NEET observer have told the National Testing Agency that conducts the exam that the police complaint by the parent is fictitious and in bad intention. Kollam police seem pretty convinced that there is nothing fictitious about the police complaint. After an initial probe, they have lodged an FIR naming sections 354 and 509, which is outraging and insulting the modesty of a woman. Subsequently, 2 more police complaints have come via email. Kerala's Minister for Higher Education, in a strongly worded letter to the NTA and Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, said the inhuman behavior naked assault on the dignity and honor of the girl students.
Probe should be made in a very detailed manner in this regard, because we have to ensure the students' psychological conditions. They have to write the examination in a peaceful mind, and this had negative impacts according to the student.
I have met the Honorable Minister of Education, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan ji, along with Shri Veer Muratharan was also present. We had a very fruitful discussion about this matter, and I have made all the issues before him, and the government of India, on behalf of the government or the ministry, is saying that a criminal investigation is going on.
With camera person SP Babu in Kerala, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
All right. I hope this serves as a lesson to never, do something like this again and traumatize young girls. Well, moving on to another story from Haryana now, a horrifying incident that captures the terror of the mining mafia in Haryana, where a senior police officer was run over by a stone-laden truck in New when he went to stop illegal stone mining.
One of the accused, that is the driver of the vehicle that ran him over, was arrested after he was injured in an exchange of fire with the police. Now, the police have also found the dumper truck that was allegedly used to run over the police officer. So, horrific incident there. Ghazali gets us the details.
Haryana DSP Surinder Singh, posted in New district, crushed to death by the mining mafia.
We have registered a case of 302, 307, 333, 186 IPC and 353 IPC, along with 379, 188. Our teams are in the field, very hopeful of success very quickly.
Surinder Singh got off his police vehicle when he saw a speeding dumper coming from Aravali side. He signalled the driver to stop, but the truck ran him over.
सुबह से घरेलू बातें होती रहती थी, आज भी सुबह बात हुई थी, रिटायरमेंट इसी साथ, एक बेटा एक बेटी.
Opposition leaders have criticized the government over law and order in the state. Just a couple of days ago, over half a dozen Haryana MLAs received threats.
माइनिंग माफिया बेकाबू होता जा रहा है. वैसे तो हरियाणा में सारा कानून व्यवस्था बिल्कुल चरमरा गई है. रोज इतने कत्ल, भाई विधायकों को धमकी, तो आज ना तो विधायक सुरक्षित हैं, ना पुलिस अपने आप को सुरक्षित महसूस करती है.
CM Manohar Lal Khattar has announced 1 crore rupees for the officer's family and promised strict action.
हम वीर सैनिकों को हमेशा ऐसे मामलों में सबका मनोबल बढ़ाने के लिए भी अपने आप को भी प्रस्तुत करना चाहिए और उस परिवार की भी जिसकी क्षति हुई है उसके साथ भी खड़े हैं.
The NGT on several occasions has asked the government of Haryana to take action against illegal mining in the state. But the broad daylight murder of DSP Surinder Singh highlights how the illegal mining continues with impunity. With Mukesh Singh Sengar, Rika Roy for NDTV.
Welcome back. Let's get to the latest now on Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's parliament will vote for a president to replace Gotabaya Rajapaksa today, and they've already started gathering this morning.
That's right, Gargi. Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe, the former Rajapaksa-aligned leader and now independent Dallas Alaparuma and the leftist Anura Kamura are all in the fray, and they were nominated by the parties through the secret ballot. Analysts say that the front runner is Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is, of course, a 6-time former Prime Minister who became acting president. So we'll see what happens in those elections, and of course a 3-way fight there.
Right, and the worry is that if indeed, as it looks, that Ranil Wickremesinghe does emerge as president, we're going to see those protesters taking to the streets again. All right, and as we said, they've already started arriving there this morning for the election. Also, tight security being seen in that Gaul sea face area for ahead of this election for the new president. Well, let's go across to Shrija now for more. So, Shrija. All right, before we go to Shrija, let's just take a look at what External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar told an all-party meeting yesterday that took place on this entire Sri Lanka crisis.
That there is a very serious crisis in Sri Lanka. That the situation there is unprecedented in terms of the what we are seeing, the financial and social and political consequences of that. It is a very close neighbor, so naturally the level of concern as well as the worry that there would be spillover to India is there. The support that India has given, $3.8 billion assistance, no other country has given this level of support to Sri Lanka this year.
All right, and a response to what Dr. Jai Shankar said, and MP Owaisi tweeted about that his initial remarks that there's a misinformation campaign and comparison between India and Sri Lanka. If so, why did DEA have to make a presentation? Many opposition parties oppose this politicization, and he also argued he also says that Dr. Jai Shankar argued that the comparison between Sri Lanka and India was misinformed. Sri Lanka is in this mess because Gotabaya suppressed data. Will the Prime Minister's office release data on job loss and child labour?
Now let's go across to Srija for more on this. Srija, the front runner currently is Ranil Wickremesinghe, and that's concerning because the protesters' only demand was for Ranil Wickremesinghe and both the Prime Minister and the President to step down. So if he gets elected again, that means we're back to square one and no progress?
Well, that's right. In fact, Sri Lanka and citizens, what they say is that they're going to be back to square one if Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe comes to power. And of course, right now, if you're talking about the contenders, yes, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, at least about before Mr. Sajith Premadasa, he could pull out of the presidential candidacy. We understand that Ranil Wickremesinghe had a very, very clear edge over the other contenders. But now it is a very neck-to-neck fight between Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe as well as Dallas Alahaperama as well. Now, Dallas Alahaperama is a former journalist and also a dissident of the parent party, which is Sri Lanka's majoritarian party, SLPP. Now, of course, Mr. Ranil, with just one parliamentarian seat, UNP, we understand there is dissonance within SLPP. While some of them have also agreed to support Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, and now even Ceylon Congress workers have agreed to offer unanimously support Ranil Wickremesinghe. We see that Dallas Alahaperama's support is now being backed by SJB, which is the principal opposition in Sri Lanka. This is where Mr. Sajith Premadasa, he went on to talk about where he's withdrawing his candidacy and unanimously supporting Dallas Alahaperama as well. Now, just after that, we understand since there is dissidence within SLPP, a few of the members are now offering to support Dallas, and then he's managing to garner the rest of the votes even from the TNA as well, where they have gone on to make it official on Twitter, saying that the 10 seats, that is 10 votes, are guaranteed for Dallas Alahaperama. So if you're talking about the numbers game, yes, in a 225 parliamentary Sri Lanka elections right now that we're looking at, as far as Ranil is concerned, there are chances that he could secure at least anywhere between 85 to 90 votes, but whereas Dallas Alahaperama is concerned, now he is also close, very neck-to-neck fight with Mr. Ranil, where he's able to touch anywhere between 75 to 80 votes. So it's going to be a very tough fight, and Sri Lanka will see a new president in the next, by the end of the day, but it's going to be very crucial. One of the major reasons why we understand Mr. Sajith had to pull out of the race is only because, where all party leaders had arrived at a consensus talking about where they don't want, in fact, Mr. Ranil to be in power. Now, that is the same tone which is being resonated by the protesters here in Sri Lanka as well. So, keeping that in mind, we understand Mr. Sajith and Dallas Alahaperama struck a deal, and so we understand Dallas now is in the presidential race, and after that we're also looking at Mr. Anurakumara Dissanayake, but however, his chances are slim is what we are given to understand by the political analysts.
All right, Shrija, thanks so much for joining us with all that, and we'll continue to track all those developments. Also, reports of large police presence around the Gotabaya protest site there in Sri Lanka ahead of the elections.